Ladies and gentlemen, life has a way of breaking us. It has a way of putting us on our knees, smashing our confidence, and making us believe that the peak we once dreamed of is now too far to climb. Some of you sitting here today know exactly what I mean. You've been knocked down so many times, you've started to wonder if standing up again is even worth it. You've faced betrayal, loss, failure, illness, financial ruin, heartbreak, disappointment, and you've carried the scars of those experiences like heavy chains. But I'm here to tell you something that neuroscience, psychology, and human history all prove without a shred of doubt. The human brain, the human spirit, and the human body are wired not just to survive, but to rebuild, to regenerate, to rise stronger than ever. And today, it's time for your comeback. Think about this. Every cell in your body is constantly repairing, constantly regenerating, constantly fighting for you even when you've stopped fighting for yourself. Your nervous system doesn't quit when you do. Your heart doesn't say, well, he's depressed, so I'll just stop beating. No, it pounds, it keeps going, it keeps reminding you with every single beat that there's life inside you, and where there's life, there's possibility. But here's the brutal truth most people don't want to hear. Just being alive doesn't mean you're living. Survival is the minimum. Comeback is the choice. And that choice requires control, discipline, and execution. Because the comeback is not given, it's earned. I've seen this over and over again in the field of neuroscience. When someone suffers a traumatic brain injury, when a stroke wipes out the ability to speak or walk, most people assume that's the end of the story. But the brain doesn't just roll over and accept defeat. Through neuroplasticity, new pathways form, new connections spark, new circuits take over with the right environment, with enough repetition, with enough demand placed upon it, the brain finds a way to rewire itself. I've seen patients told they would never walk again, stand up and take steps. I've seen people stripped of their memory, build new ones. I've seen the so-called impossible happen. That's the essence of comeback. Your biology itself is screaming at you, don't you dare stay down. Build again, rise again, fight again. But the tragedy is this, most people never translate biology into psychology. They let setbacks define them. They let failure harden into identity. They tell themselves stories like, I guess I just wasn't meant for success, or it's too late for me now. And that's the most destructive lie you could ever accept, because the moment you say those words, your comeback dies in your mouth. Your brain listens to the commands you give it. You tell it you're finished, it shuts down possibility. You tell it you're too broken, it stops searching for solutions. You tell it you're weak, it takes away your strength. I want you to remember something. Pain is not the enemy, discomfort's not the enemy, failure's not the enemy. They are signals. They are data. They are feedback from life saying, adjust your course, harden your mind, strengthen your resolve, change your approach. The enemy is stagnation. The enemy is surrender. The enemy is the quiet voice inside that tells you to just accept mediocrity because fighting hurts too much. And that voice is lying to you. Because while fighting hurts, surrender kills. Look at history. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison. 27 years. Stripped of freedom, humiliated, beaten, isolated. Most men would have crumbled, would have wasted away into bitterness and despair. But Mandela used that time to sharpen his mind, discipline his spirit, and prepare for his comeback. When he walked out, he didn't just walk free. He walked into leadership, reconciliation, and global influence. His setback was not the end, it was the incubation of his power. Or think about J.K. Rowling, rejected by 12 publishers, living on welfare, considered a failure by every measurable standard of her society. Yet she sat down and wrote, and kept writing, and kept sending manuscripts until one finally stuck. Her comeback, a story that touched hundreds of millions of lives and built one of the most successful franchises in literary history. Now you might be sitting there saying, but I'm not Mandela, I'm not Rowling, I'm not extraordinary. And you're right, you're not them. But you don't need to be. Your comeback isn't about being compared to someone else. It's about being better than who you were yesterday. It's about deciding that whatever knocked you down doesn't get the final say. Let me share something from neuroscience again. Stress, trauma, and failure don't just break you. They change you. They alter your neural wiring. They reshape your brain chemistry. They trigger cascades of hormones and neurotransmitters that condition you to either shrink or adapt. Chronic stress elevates cortisol, suppresses immune function, and literally shrinks areas of the brain responsible for memory and learning. But here's the miracle. Those same stressors, when faced with the right mindset and the right actions, trigger growth. They activate neurogenesis, the creation of new brain cells. They stimulate resilience circuits. They force the body and mind to evolve, meaning that comeback is not just psychological, it's biological. It's written into your flesh. The choice is whether you cooperate with it or resist it. I once worked with a man who had lost his business, his marriage, and nearly his will to live. He sat in my office slumped over, speaking in the monotone of someone who believed his best days were gone. But instead of drowning in sympathy, we put him on a regimen: structured sleep, exercise, journaling, cognitive reframing, step-by-step rebuilding of his confidence through small wins. 6 months later, the same man walked into my office, taller, sharper, more alive. He hadn't rebuilt the million-dollar company yet, but he had rebuilt himself. And when you rebuild yourself, rebuilding the outside world becomes inevitable. That's what I want to burn into your minds today. The comeback is not about circumstances changing first. It's about you changing first. Most people wait for luck, for timing, for other people to come rescue them. They wait for the economy to improve, for their health to magically restore, for someone to believe in them, and they wait until they rise. Comeback begins when you decide that no matter how unfair, no matter how painful, no matter how overwhelming, it's on you to rise. And don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying it will be easy. Easy is what broke you in the first place. Easy is what made you complacent. Easy is what taught you to play small. Comeback is not built in comfort. Comeback is forged in resistance. The gym doesn't make you stronger by offering you light weights. It makes you stronger by giving you the load that feels unbearable until your muscles adapt. Life operates on the same principle. That crushing weight on your chest, that failure, that betrayal, that loss, that's the resistance that can make you more powerful than you've ever been if you choose to lift it instead of lying under it. Ladies and gentlemen, when I look at you, I don't see people who are finished. I don't see people destined to be stuck in their past. I see people with brains that can rewire, bodies that can regenerate, spirits that can endure. I see potential that is screaming to be unlocked. I see comebacks waiting to happen. But no one can make that choice for you. Not me, not your family, not your friends. It has to be you. And here's what I promise you. If you commit, if you execute, if you rise, your comeback will not just restore what you lost, it will multiply it. It will elevate you to heights you didn't even know existed, because once you've been broken and rebuilt, you are no longer fragile. Once you've lost and fought back, you are no longer afraid of loss. Once you've tasted despair and clawed your way out, you are no longer bound by fear. That's what makes comebacks so powerful. They don't return you to who you were. They transform you into who you were meant to be all along. And right now, this moment, this very breath, you have the chance to decide. You can walk out of here chained to your past, or you can walk out of here igniting your comeback. The science proves it. The stories prove it. Your own biology proves it. The only missing ingredient is your decision. And so I ask you, are you ready to rise stronger than ever? Because if you are, then your comeback begins not tomorrow, not next week, not someday. It begins now. Now let's get brutally honest, because a comeback is not a fairy tale. Too many people think rising again is about waiting for destiny to hand them another opportunity. They confuse optimism with entitlement. They think because they suffered, because they lost, because they struggled, the universe owes them a reward. Let me break the illusion. Life doesn't care. The market doesn't care. The world doesn't care how many times you've been knocked down. What matters is whether you get up and execute. I've seen people lose everything and come back with twice the fire. And I've seen people lose everything and use it as a permanent excuse to play victim. The difference wasn't fate, it was choice. The difference was whether they decided that failure was the end or whether failure was fuel. And here's the beauty of it. When you decide to use failure as fuel, you unlock a level of energy and creativity you never knew you had. Neuroscientists call this post-traumatic growth, the paradoxical phenomenon where people not only recover from trauma, but actually surpass their previous level of functioning. They develop deeper gratitude, greater resilience, sharper priorities, and a clearer sense of purpose. Think of Viktor Frankl, imprisoned in Auschwitz, stripped of everything, even his family. He should have died bitter, broken, destroyed. But instead, he found meaning in the midst of hell. He wrote later that those who had a why could survive almost anyhow. His comeback was not external, it was internal. From that internal strength, he built a legacy of psychological insight that has helped millions find meaning in their suffering. And that's the secret of every powerful comeback. It doesn't start with your bank account, your job, your relationships, or your reputation. It starts with your mind. You can rebuild a career if you rebuild your focus. You can rebuild trust if you rebuild your integrity. You can rebuild wealth if you rebuild discipline. But if you never rebuild your mind, nothing else will stick. Now let's talk about something most people don't want to face: fear. Fear is the parasite that feeds on your pain and convinces you not to try again. Neuroscience tells us that fear activates the amygdala, the ancient part of the brain that screams danger even when no danger exists. And when fear dominates the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for rational thought, planning, decision-making, shuts down. That's why you freeze. That's why you procrastinate. That's why you avoid. But here's what's crucial. Repeated exposure to fear without retreat literally shrinks the amygdala's influence. In other words, courage rewires your brain. Every time you confront what scares you, you weaken fear's control. That's not motivational fluff. It's biology. So when I say it's time for your comeback, I don't mean wait until you feel brave. I mean act while you're scared. Do the thing anyway. Step into the arena anyway. Make the call. Take the risk. Launch the idea. Stand up again, even if your voice shakes. Because every act of courage builds a neural pathway that makes the next act easier. Courage compounds. Execution compounds. Comebacks compound. I once studied an athlete who had shattered his leg in an accident. Doctors told him he might walk again, but competitive sport was over. He refused to accept it. He started with tiny movements, wiggling a toe, flexing an ankle. The process was excruciating, but with every repetition, his brain laid new tracks, his muscles adapted, his body learned again. Years later, he not only walked, he ran, and then he competed. His comeback wasn't fast, it wasn't glamorous, but it was real. And it all began with the decision to refuse finality. This is where most people fail. They want the comeback without the grind. They want the glory without the struggle. They want the transformation without the daily battle of doing what feels impossible. But there's no shortcut. The grind is the comeback. The pain is the comeback. The discipline is the comeback. And when you finally rise, you'll realize the very process you tried to avoid was what made you unstoppable. And let me remind you, science supports this to the core. Muscles don't grow without micro tears. Bones don't strengthen without stress. Immune systems don't adapt without exposure. The human brain doesn't expand its capacity without challenge. Everywhere you look, nature is screaming the same truth. Growth requires struggle. Strength requires resistance. Comeback requires chaos. So stop wishing for easy and start using hard. You might be thinking, but I've already wasted so much time. Let me crush that excuse right now. Neuroscience tells us the brain remains plastic, capable of change well into old age. Studies show people in their 70s and 80s learning new languages, new skills, even building new careers. Entrepreneurs have launched billion-dollar companies after 60. People have fallen in love after 70. Comebacks don't expire with age, they expire with excuses. And if you need proof, look at Colonel Sanders. At 65, broke, rejected over 1,000 times. He turned a chicken recipe into a global empire. Look at Ray Kroc, 50 years old, when he took over McDonald's. Look at Sam Walton, who built Walmart past the age when most people retire. Look at Harlan Stonecipher, who created prepaid legal services after being bankrupted by a car accident lawsuit. Comebacks don't care about your birth certificate. They care about your hunger. Now let's turn to something deeper: identity. Too many of you are clinging to the identity of your failure. You call yourself the divorced one, the bankrupt one, the addict, the loser, and by repeating that story, you anchor yourself to your past. But identity is malleable. Neuroscience shows us that self-perception literally shapes brain wiring. If you call yourself weak, your brain aligns its resources to confirm that belief. If you call yourself resilient, your brain aligns to prove it. You are not your past. You are not your failure. You are not your trauma. You are whatever you decide to be today, backed by relentless execution. That's why affirmations alone don't work. You can't just chant, "I'm strong," while doing nothing. The brain doesn't buy lies. It rewires only through congruence. You tell yourself you're strong, then you act strong. Then you keep acting strong, even when you don't feel it. That's when the brain accepts the new identity. That's when the comeback sticks. I want you to ask yourself something right now. What have you been tolerating? What broken habits? What toxic people? What self-sabotaging routines? What excuses have you been letting slide? Because a comeback requires subtraction before addition. You don't build a skyscraper on rotten foundation. You demolish what's weak, clear what's toxic, and then pour steel and concrete. In your life, that means cutting the excuses, cutting the complainers, cutting the distractions, cutting the mediocrity. You can't rise stronger if you're still carrying dead weight. Now listen carefully. Your comeback is not just for you. This is bigger than you. Your comeback gives others permission to believe in theirs. When a parent comes back, the children see it. When a leader comes back, the team sees it. When a survivor comes back, the world sees it. Your rise is not selfish, it's service. It's proof that resilience is real. It's proof that we are more than our circumstances. And let's go one step further. Your comeback is necessary because the world doesn't need more quitters. It doesn't need more victims. It doesn't need more people sleepwalking through life. It needs warriors. It needs builders. It needs men and women who can take a punch, spit blood, stand tall, and move forward again. That's you. That can be you if you decide. So here's the raw truth. No one is coming to save you. Not me, not the government, not your family, not some mystical force. If you're waiting for rescue, you're already lost. The only one who can make your comeback happen is staring at you in the mirror. And once you accept that, once you stop waiting, once you stop hoping and start executing, you become unstoppable. And when you finally rise, when you finally walk back into the arena, scarred but unbroken, something extraordinary happens. The past loses its hold on you. You realize the very thing you thought would destroy you has become your advantage. The comeback doesn't erase your pain. It transforms it into power. Ladies and gentlemen, I can see it in your eyes right now. Some of you are fighting battles nobody knows about. Some of you are at the breaking point. Some of you are barely holding on. And some of you are already rising, but you're afraid you don't have what it takes to finish. Let me tell you, you do. The science says you do. History says you do. Life itself says you do. The only thing left is your decision. And if you make it, if you decide tonight, right now, this second, that you will rise, then I promise you this: the world hasn't seen your best yet. Your story isn't finished. Your power isn't spent. Your comeback is here. Now, the only question is, will you stand up and claim it? Oh. I love investing.